On a seemingly ordinary Christmas day, a family gathering spirals into chaos, unearthing a tangled web of love, betrayal, and unspoken pain. Here, in a festively adorned living room, the once comforting presence of a mother is overshadowed by a son transformed, his laughter now distant, his warmth extinguished. As the gift-wrapped promises of the holiday sit untouched, a silent battle rages beneath the surface. This poignant tale traces back to a mother's unwavering hope, a brother's solemn vow, and the irrevocable fractures that time has carved into familial bonds. What happens when love meets its match? The room felt like it was closing in around me. The flickering lights on the Christmas tree, once symbols of joy and celebration, now cast long shadows that echoed the tension thrumming silently in the air. The decorations, carefully hung with love and anticipation, seemed to mock the disarray unfolding before me. Arthur glanced at Caleb, his brow furrowed, trying to read the unreadable. In that moment, I felt the weight of his protective instincts strain against the unraveling threads of our family tapestry. The illusion of a perfect Christmas shattered as the stark reality of our fractured relationships came into sharper focus. The laughter of children playing outside, the distant sound of festive carols, all felt like a world apart from this living room suffocating under the weight of unspoken grievances. "Where is Margaret?" Arthur repeated, his voice steady yet laced with concern, as if the simple question held the power to unravel the chaos woven into our lives. His demeanor, a bastion of calm in the storm, contrasted sharply with the tempest swirling within me. I had evicted my mother, yes, but it wasn't just about her presence. It was about reclaiming my space, my dignity, after years of feeling overshadowed by the legacy of loss and unresolved anguish. "Mom," Caleb said, his voice devoid of warmth, "I think it's time we had a serious talk." The formality of his tone was chilling, a stark reminder that the boy I had nurtured was now a man who viewed me as a mere inconvenience, a relic of a past he seemed desperate to escape. The boy who had once clung to my side now stood before me, arms crossed, as if he were a judge weighing the merits of my very existence. The sound of the phone ringing pierced the tension, a lifeline thrown into the turbulent waters of our familial strife. Arthur's hand moved instinctively to answer it, a gesture that signaled a shift, though I couldn't yet fathom its implications. The call that would change everything began with a simple greeting, an innocuous phrase that would soon spiral into a series of events none of us could foresee. As I stood there, rooted to the spot, I felt the air thicken with a blend of fear and defiance. Fear of losing what little was left of my family, and defiance against the son who had become a stranger. The room, which had once been a sanctuary, felt more like a courtroom, with Arthur presiding over a trial where we were all defendants, grappling with our charges of betrayal, neglect, and guilt. In that moment, memories flooded back with the ferocity of a storm, the laughter echoing from family dinners, the warmth of shared stories, the softness of hugs that felt like home. All of it slipping away as we stood on the precipice of an abyss formed by misunderstandings and unhealed wounds. I was a mother who had fought to keep her family together, and here I was, at the brink of losing everything that mattered. What had gone wrong? Where had the love that once connected us been buried beneath layers of resentment and misunderstanding? I had poured my heart into this family, sacrificing pieces of myself for the sake of harmony, only to find myself standing alone in the wreckage of our shared history. With each passing moment, I could feel the chasm widening. My gaze shifted between Arthur and Caleb, the two pillars of my life, now at odds in a way I had never anticipated. The gifts meant to bring joy sat neglected, mere placeholders in the narrative of our shared suffering. And beneath it all simmered the unshakable truth. Love, no matter how fierce, can also breed pain, and in that pain, we often lose sight of one another amidst the chaos. Yuk and severe. Justice, it seemed, had a way of threading its fingers into the fabric of our lives, weaving intricate patterns of consequence and accountability. As my son's voice, now resolute and unwavering, echoed through that dimly lit room, the air thickened with an unspoken tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of what was to come. From my vantage point in the car, I could see the shadows of the past flickering in Arthur's determined gaze. He was no longer the little boy I had once cradled in my arms, nor the naive young man who had trusted blindly in the bonds of family. The years had chipped away at that innocent trust, revealing a complexity of emotions buried under layers of loyalty, frustration, and heartbreak. The stark contrast between the love he had once shown and the anger now simmering beneath the surface was palpable. It was a transformation forged in the fire of betrayal, a metamorphosis that would not allow him to turn back. Outside, a gust of wind rustled the leaves of the ancient oak tree that stood sentinel in the yard, as if whispering secrets of resilience and endurance. This house, filled with echoes of laughter and love, had become a battleground, each room a testament to the stories we once shared. But now, as Arthur stood framed against the window, the weight of impending conflict hung heavily in the air, mingling with the scent of rain-soaked earth. The sky, darkening with ominous clouds, mirrored the turmoil brewing within our familial bonds. Veronica's cold dismissal of my presence echoed in the recesses of my mind. Her words, sharpened by a well-choreographed conviction, seemed to slice through the frail tapestry of our shared history. She portrayed me as an unwelcome ghost haunting their lives, a relic of a past she wished to obliterate. Yet, I was not just a memory. I was a witness to Caleb's true self, the loving boy he had been before the shadows of manipulation transformed him into a stranger. The realization clawed at my insides. The love I had nurtured was now twisted into a weapon wielded against me, a tool of deception that threatened to erase the very essence of who I was. As Arthur turned away from the window, the gravity of his intentions hung like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. "Caleb," he said, his voice steady but laced with an urgency that demanded attention, "this isn't just about your mother or Veronica. It's about the very principles that define us as a family, as human beings. We cannot allow ourselves to be complicit in wrongdoing. We owe it to our own hearts to confront this darkness." His words were not merely a plea. They were a call to arms, a rallying cry against the encroaching shadows that threatened to engulf us. In that moment of stillness, as the world outside grew increasingly chaotic, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Perhaps, just perhaps, this confrontation would reveal truths long buried beneath the weight of silence. Perhaps the love we fought so hard to protect could emerge, resilient and unyielding, from the ashes of our discord. Arthur's unwavering resolve ignited a spark of courage within me. I was no longer a passive observer in this unfolding drama. I was ready to reclaim my place in the narrative, to fight for the love that had once defined us, to carve a path back to understanding and compassion. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping softly against the roof of the car, I knew that the storm was not just brewing outside, but within us all, a tempest that would either wash away the pain or lead us into deeper turmoil. But one thing was certain: the facade of normalcy had shattered, and now, with the truth as our ally, we were poised on the precipice of a reckoning. The time for silence had passed. Now was the moment of confrontation, of justice, and, perhaps, of redemption. The rain drummed steadily on the rooftop, a rhythmic reminder of the storm that raged not just outside, but within the walls of this family's fractured home. In the dim light of the living room, the tension was palpable, each breath heavy with unspoken words, each glance a mix of fear and defiance. The air crackled with the weight of betrayal and desperation as the characters in this unfolding drama navigated the treacherous waters of family loyalty, greed, and the quest for redemption. At the center of this turmoil was Caleb, a young man caught between his mother, Margaret, and his wife, Veronica. His silence echoed louder than the argument that raged around him, a silence that spoke of confusion and heartbreak. He had entrusted his future to Veronica, believing her intentions were rooted in love and a desire for their shared happiness. Yet, as the truths began to unravel, it became painfully clear that the threads of loyalty were fraying dangerously. The documents he had signed under duress were not just pieces of paper. They represented a life-altering decision he had taken without fully comprehending the consequences, a decision that was now threatening to tear apart the very fabric of his family. Veronica stood rigid, her demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. Stripped of the facade she had so carefully constructed, her defenses were crumbling. The cold, calculating resolve with which she had approached the situation was now giving way to a raw vulnerability, a blend of anger and fear. She had imagined a future of stability and happiness, but the reality of her actions lay before her like shattered glass, cutting deep into the relationships she had taken for granted. In her mind, she had acted in self-defense, a woman protecting her marriage, yet as Benjamin, the family's lawyer, pointed out, the deceit that had underpinned their actions would ultimately prove to be their undoing. Benjamin's voice broke through the tumult, steady and authoritative. He articulated the legal ramifications of their actions, the gravity of what had occurred. His words were like a lifeline thrown into the churning waters of confusion, but for Caleb, they also served as a reminder of the deep betrayal he had endured. The realization that his mother still held a 50% stake in the family home, a sanctuary of memories and love, added an additional layer of complexity. Veronica's suggestion to sell the house, to divide the spoils, felt like salt in an open wound. It was a cold, calculated solution to a problem birthed from emotional chaos. Arthur, steadfast and principled, emerged as a voice of reason amidst the storm. His laughter, devoid of humor, captured the absurdity of the situation, the idea that a 68-year-old woman would be forced to relinquish the only home she had ever known, all for the sake of a couple seeking to solidify their new life. The juxtaposition of his stern resolve against Veronica's frantic pleas painted a striking picture of a family at odds with its own values. Arthur's words struck a chord, igniting a sense of justice that had been long buried beneath layers of neglect and deception. As the conversation escalated, the term mistake echoed hauntingly, a hollow justification for actions that had torn at the very core of this family. The manipulation that had ensued, the calculated choices made in the shadows, had not only robbed Margaret of her dignity, but had also cast a long shadow over the future of Caleb and Veronica's relationship. The weight of the past hung heavily as they grappled with the consequences of their decisions. It was a hard lesson in trust and betrayal, one that would require significant introspection and growth to transcend. In this critical moment, the characters began to confront their demons. Margaret's voice, once filled with warmth and acceptance, now reverberated with righteous indignation. She had welcomed Veronica into her home, treating her as a daughter, only to have her kindness turned against her. This visceral confrontation illuminated the heart of the matter. Love, when manipulated and weaponized, can morph into something unrecognizable. As each person reflected on their choices, the potential for healing appeared within reach, a transformative reckoning fueled by the desire to reclaim not only what was lost but also the bonds that had fractured under the weight of betrayal. Traced a disjointed line across the page, a reflection of the tumult unfolding within him. Each stroke of the pen seemed to carry the weight of years spent in the shadow of resentment and regret. The room, heavy with the scent of unspoken truths and shattered dreams, felt like a battleground where familial bonds were being tested beyond their limits. Caleb's gaze lingered on the documents, his mind racing through the implications of his actions. There was a time when he viewed his mother, Margaret, as an unwavering pillar of strength, a beacon of unconditional love. But that love had been overshadowed by Veronica's manipulative grip, a force that had gradually twisted their relationship into a fragile veneer of mutual respect. The realization that he had allowed his wife to dictate the terms of his loyalty struck him with a profound sense of shame. In an effort to placate Veronica's insecurities, he had severed ties with the one person who had always stood by him, and the cost of that decision was becoming painfully clear. Margaret, on the other hand, found herself navigating the tumult of emotions with surprising clarity. In this moment of reckoning, she felt a deep-seated resolve, a fierce determination to reclaim her autonomy from the charred remnants of her past. Her heart, once bruised by betrayal, now beat with a sense of liberation. The act of asserting her will, to sell the house that had been both a sanctuary and a prison, was more than just a financial decision. It was a reclamation of her identity. The home that had held the echoes of laughter and the warmth of familial gatherings was now a monument to her suffering, a reminder of the love that had been weaponized against her. She understood that the emotional weight of her memories could not be undone by mere bricks and mortar. It would take a deeper, more personal journey to heal the scars left by betrayal. As Benjamin continued to explain the intricacies of the legal documents, his voice droned on like a distant thunder, punctuating the silence that enveloped the room. Each clause read aloud felt like a hammer striking the anvil of their fractured relationships. The atmosphere thickened with unspoken words, memories of happier times now tainted with the residue of conflict. Veronica, seated beside Caleb, was a statue of defiance, her features carved in a grimace as she processed the irreversible shift in her life. The facade she had constructed began to crumble under the strain of reality, her power waning, her influence over Caleb hanging by a thread. With each signature penned, the reality of their choices crystallized. Caleb's hand trembled not only from fear but also from the dawning recognition of the cost of his complacency. He had gambled with the sanctity of his family, and now the stakes were being laid bare before him. Each document signed was a step away from the life he had built with Veronica, a life now devoid of the warmth he had once taken for granted. Margaret watched as they signed, a mix of sorrow and relief washing over her. She felt no joy in their defeat, only a heavy heart burdened by the love she still held for her son, despite the pain he had caused. As the last document was signed, a silence fell over them, pregnant with the weight of finality. In that moment, Margaret understood the paradox of love and loss. She was no longer the woman who would forgive and forget. She was a survivor, ready to step into a future where she could reclaim her narrative, free from the shadows of betrayal. In the aftermath, as the paperwork lay scattered across the table like shattered dreams waiting to be reborn, the characters stood at a crossroads, each contemplating the path that lay before them. The journey toward healing and reconciliation would not be easy, but the first step had been taken. In the quiet aftermath of their conflict, a fragile hope began to emerge, a flicker of possibility that perhaps, in the unlikeliest of circumstances, they could forge new beginnings from the ashes of their past. That allows me to embrace the future without trepidation. It was as if each figure on that page represented not just financial transactions, but the rebirth of purpose. In that moment, I allowed myself to dream again. As the door swung open, the cool February air rushed in, carrying a hint of crisp renewal. Outside, the world continued its relentless march forward, oblivious to the monumental shifts that had just transpired within the walls of the notary's office. For Margaret and Caleb, what lay beyond that door was a future laden with both uncertainty and potential, a dichotomy that echoed the essence of their fractured relationship. Caleb, armed with a newfound resolve, stepped into his own wilderness. He left behind the pain and remorse of his past, determined to carve out a new existence. The journey ahead would undoubtedly be fraught with challenges, but there was a glint of determination in his eyes that spoke volumes. His admission of love, coupled with the weight of his sorrow, hinted at the profound changes stirring within him. No longer was he the careless boy who had taken so much for granted. He was a man on the brink of transformation, ready to face the hard truths and embrace the idea of accountability. As Margaret watched him depart, a melancholic yet liberating sigh escaped her lips. She grappled with the heavy realization that love could manifest in myriad forms, often intertwined with lessons that are hard to learn. This new chapter, while fraught with uncertainty, also bore the promise of healing. The juxtaposition of their shared heartache made the prospect of a fresh start not only necessary but imperative. Back in the confines of her thoughts, Margaret reflected on her dreams of a new living space, one that could cradle her memories while inviting new experiences. The condo near the park represented not merely a physical relocation, but a symbolic shift towards self-empowerment. It was a space where she could cultivate joy, solitude, and independence, elements she had long sacrificed at the altar of familial strife. The trees outside would whisper stories of hope, reminding her that life was, indeed, a continuous cycle of birth and rebirth. In the weeks that followed, both Margaret and Caleb found themselves navigating the terrain of their respective paths. Margaret meticulously planned her move, embracing the thrill of interior design choices, and the prospect of a sunlit balcony became her sanctuary. With each decision, from paint colors to furniture arrangements, she built not just a home, but a fortress of resilience. Friends and family rallied around her, serving as a constant reminder that she was not alone in her endeavor. They helped her unpack boxes, share laughter, and encourage her to weave connections in her new life. Meanwhile, Caleb began to explore the concept of self-worth. He enrolled in workshops, sought therapy, and even volunteered at local shelters. Each step solidified his commitment to becoming the man he aspired to be, not just for his mother, but also for himself. The road was rocky and often littered with moments of doubt, yet he pressed on, motivated by the love that had finally pierced through his layers of denial. As months turned into seasons, the ripples of their experiences began to converge, underscoring the profound reality that healing is not linear. Their paths, once starkly divided, began to intertwine again. After a year, they found themselves face to face once more, this time with no expectations, only an understanding of the shared journey they had undertaken. The conversation was tentative at first, punctuated by silence and cautious glances, but the air was charged with unspoken words of hope. Through the lens of time, the impact of their choices became clearer. Margaret's ability to forgive, not just Caleb but herself, emerged as a testament to the healing power of love when intertwined with respect. Caleb's journey to self-discovery embodied the essential truth that redemption is a path each person must tread alone, yet it is often illuminated by the light of those we hold dear. Their story unfolded as a poignant reminder that it is through the tapestry of our struggles that we find threads of connection, resilience, and ultimately, a way back to one another. In the wake of their intertwined journeys, both Caleb and Margaret stand at the precipice of transformation. Each, armed with the lessons of love and loss, seeks a path towards redemption. Though separated by choices, their hearts echo the profound truth. The future is forged in the crucible of past mistakes, illuminated by hope.